Ah yes, the famous Sly Cooper Thieves in Time cliffhanger. What could have been if only, right? These words always pop in our head. Hey everyone, I'm Vivi and welcome back. Now there's one thing which we have to realize. Sony owns this franchise. They are the holder of this IP. If ever one day Sony greenlights a sequel and another studio handles this, let's imagine first-party studio just for the heck of it. Someone from PlayStation Studios, whoever this may be, they will have the freedom to completely rewrite what we are seeing here. First and foremost, to keep you all in the loop, it is important to mention the original intent behind this setting in what seems to look like ancient Egypt. I've said this quite a lot, but I'll say it again just in case you're new to the channel. Sly Cooper Thieves in Time originally had DLC planned. An interview back in 2019 was held with Kinda Funny Games and Sanzaru's Matt Kramer, Sanzaru being the developer of Thieves in Time. By the way, if you didn't know, shortly after, in 2020, Sanzaru Games got bought out by Facebook's Oculus. Now during this interview, not only was Egypt originally planned as the first episode for Thieves in Time, but it was also then reconsidered as a DLC which never saw the light of day. Artist Paul Sullivan actually has a few concepts of Egypt. Just looking at this as a whole, it really seems to showcase ancient Egypt. Not only that, Kramer added that they had a whole entire script already written out for this ancient Egypt episode with Sly's Egyptian ancestor, Slyton Common. All in all, just looking at this scene, we tend to lean towards Sanzaru's original vision, Sly being stuck in ancient Egypt. But hey, if a new team ever decides to pick this up, this cliffhanger right here could potentially no longer be what we expect. They might decide to turn this whole scenario around and come up with a whole different plot. A different script entirely. Sure, Sanzaru had planned DLC for Ancient Egypt and had their own script ready, but it doesn't mean a new studio has to stick with it. One sure way of completely turning this around is by having Sly stuck in either modern-day Egypt or future. Modern-day Egypt might make it easier for the team, Bentley, Murray, and assuming Carmelita, to locate Sly. As for future Egypt, now that's where it gets even more challenging for our characters. Sure, they might pinpoint Sly in future Egypt, but what if they hit a major roadblock, incentivizing our gang to explore, say, ancient Egypt? They suddenly realize, due to a glitch of some sort, they wound up in ancient Egypt. But Sly's in the future version. Quite frankly, if we analyze Sly's setting, is there really anything that screams out, hey, this is ancient times? For all we know, this could be an old touristic location in future Egypt. Again, future writers are free to interpret this whichever way they want. So let us imagine a scenario where our trio, Bentley, Murray, and Carmelita, realizing they're in the wrong timeline. What could possibly be worse than that, right? A lot of things can end up happening. One of them is having trouble firing up the time machine again. Could be missing a component, their time machine / van gets stolen. Citizens of Egypt notice this foreign object and decide to salvage it for riches. Overall, their challenge would be to simply escape ancient Egypt. Looking at Thieves in Time, Sly was always part of the picture. His ancestors were able to trust him and his friends. So just imagine having the gang in ancient Egypt without Sly. You can't help but wonder how they'll even gain, say, Slyton Common's trust. Would it require Carmelita in this case to use her Interpol expertise to stop bad guys in Egypt? Enough to convince that they're good guys just trying to help and find their way out? That's the thing. Remove the catalyst, aka Sly, from the equation, and then you are left with quite a conundrum in your hands. Just that alone would make for an interesting Egypt episode. This also leads to another question. With Sly being stuck in future Egypt, does this mean Sly won't get to see his other ancestors? What would justify him visiting his ancestors in this case? His circumstances just make it harder to imagine. Instead, Sly would meet his descendant. Realizes he built a family and looks at himself as the ancestor. I just imagine Sly, one way or another, stumbling on a picture of himself and Carmelita as great-grandparents. Just imagine that. Now, one can't help but wonder what balance the game would aim for. How often would we play as Sly solo? Just how long will our trio be stuck trying to get out of the wrong timeline, Ancient Egypt? Just how long would it take for us to reunite with Sly? Makes me think back to Ratchet and Clank: A Crack in Time, how Clank and Ratchet were solo for some time and then reunited. Alright, putting our focus back on Sly in future Egypt, things might turn for the worst real quick. And this is where Clockwork comes in. It never made sense how Clockwork turned robotic. We never had any explanation for that. Is this a case of gradually turning robotic as centuries passed? There's always been this little sense of mystery about Clockwork. One thing which might work. New writers might make it so Clockwork actually originates from the future, hence his appearance. And hey, they could decide to turn the whole Easter eggs in Thieves in Time canon. In this case, Clockwork's Easter eggs we saw in that game. Clockwork in Bob's time, 10,000 BC, well, that's because he's from the future and wound up there as his starting point. He then kept surviving for centuries on end. Remember, Clockwork's hate chip is what he needs to fuel himself. Having a Cooper alive in each timeline made it so he had enough fuel, true genuine hatred keeping him alive. Whether or not this is a case of Sly unintentionally triggering future Clockwork, him deciding to time travel to the past, well, that really comes down to just how deep they want this storyline to get. I mean, would they make Sly go through such an ordeal? Or would they rather have Sly witness Clockwork traveling back in time without Sly's involvement whatsoever? What do you think? All in all, could you imagine the cliffhanger being rewritten? Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments section below. As always, a massive thank you to my patrons for their awesome support. Thank you all for watching, and you can call me Vivi. Until next time.